You know when something's off. It's like the air itself holds its breath, waiting for the moment everything shatters. For me, that moment had been building for months, each small clue a thread pulling at the tapestry of the life I thought I'd built. My name is Julian Creed. I'm 43 years old, ex-intelligence officer turned CEO of Cerberus Operations, a private security firm so deep in the black that even the shadows need clearance. But this was personal. My wife, Rowena, 11 years of laughter, dinners that bled into mornings, quiet looks that felt like home, had become the edge of the blade I never saw coming. It started small. The way she turned her back to me in bed, curling herself into a question mark like the answer was somewhere in the dark. The way her voice lilted with a lullaby of excuses every time I asked about the meetings at the lake house. Just a girl's retreat, she'd said, her smile a little too soft, a little too practiced. But it was the humming that did it. She'd always hummed when she was anxious, like her guilt needed a soundtrack. I'd caught that tune one night when she thought I was asleep, that same fragile melody she used to sing when we'd slow dance in the kitchen, back before the world turned on its axis. But that night, it felt hollow. Like she was trying to convince herself of a lie she'd already believed. I'd met Silas Vane at a charity gala 3 years ago, a handshake that felt like the beginning of something real. He had that easy charisma that politicians pay consultants to fake, an open smile, a handshake that pulled you in close, the kind of guy who recommended the perfect whiskey and laughed like he'd known you since college. He played tennis with me on Saturdays, invited me to his country club, asked about Rowena with that glint of polite interest. I trusted him enough to let him into my world, into our world. And then he took my wife to my own second home to betray me. The second home I'd built for Rowena when she said she needed a place to write, to think, to breathe away from the city. At first, I wanted to believe it was just sex, that she'd fallen for a smooth talker and his easy grin. But the more I watched, the way she'd leave her phone on silent, the way she'd jump at shadows in the kitchen, I knew this wasn't just adultery. It felt orchestrated, like a script they'd rehearsed until every line was a perfect performance. And that scared me more than anything. Because I'd lived in a world of shadows, where alliances were bought and sold like cigarettes, where trust was a luxury and betrayal was currency. And now that world had come home to roost. I sat in the living room one night, the TV flickering like a dying heartbeat, while she pretended to read on the couch. She didn't know I'd been in the safe that morning, seen the coded receipts, the offshore accounts she'd set up under both our names. She didn't know I'd found the burner phone she'd hidden in the flower tin. 11 years of marriage, and she still hadn't learned. I know every inch of this house. I built it. I designed it. I made sure every window was alarmed, every door reinforced. And she thought she could hide from me? A ghost of laughter tried to escape my lips, but it felt like broken glass. Julian, she asked, her voice trembling with that edge of innocence that used to melt me. Are you okay? You've been distant. I looked up at her, studying the lines on her face, the way her fingers curled around the spine of the book like it was a shield. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to know how long it had been a lie. But all I could do was smile, that cold smile I'd practiced in interrogation rooms. Just work, honey, I lied, tasting the bitterness on my tongue. It's been a long week. She nodded, her relief palpable. She thought she'd won, that I'd let it go. But she didn't know me anymore. If she ever did, because I was Julian Creed, and I didn't let go. I hunted. I hunted until there was nothing left but ashes and a name in a file somewhere no one would ever read. Later that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her breaths, trying to remember if they'd always been that shallow. I thought about Silas. I thought about the night he toasted to old friends and new beginnings, his grin sharp as a blade. I thought about the way Rowena had glanced at him when she thought I wasn't looking. And I thought about the way she hummed that tune, the one she used to sing when she needed comfort. Now it was a weapon, hers, not mine. I knew then that the lullaby was a lie, a note she'd sharpened until it cut me in my sleep. And I knew I'd have to let it play out. Let her believe I was blind. Let her believe she'd won. Because the worst mistake a traitor can make is underestimating the man they betrayed. And I'd spent too long letting my guard down, playing the good husband, pretending I didn't see the shadows gathering behind her smile. But the shadows don't scare me. They never have. I make them. I bend them to my will. And if Rowena and Silas thought they'd found the perfect mark, if they thought they could orchestrate my downfall in my own home, then they'd forgotten the one rule I learned in all my years in the field: never bring a lullaby to a gunfight. I let her hum me to sleep. Let her think I was drifting. Let her think I was the Mark she'd married 11 years ago. But inside, I was already writing the end of this story. Her lullaby was a lie, and I was going to make sure the last note belonged to me. Rowena thought I was in Prague, closing a deal with a shady arms broker who owed me favors from my days in the field. That's what I told her. That's what she believed. What she didn't know was that I'd canceled the trip the moment I confirmed my suspicion about the lake house. She didn't know that I'd been watching her every move from the shadows of our own life. That's the thing about building a company like Cerberus Operations. You don't just design security for others, you design it for yourself. Every safe house, every bolt hole, every panic room was an extension of my own paranoia, my own meticulous need to stay 2 steps ahead. And the lake house was no exception. The drive up to the lake house had always been our retreat from the noise of the city, a place to breathe after the chaos of black tie galas and late-night board meetings. But lately, Rowena had claimed it for her solo writing retreats. She needed space, she'd said. To think. To create. I'd given it to her because that's what trust looks like. But trust, I'd learned long ago, is just another word for leverage. And when she'd left her laptop charger on the kitchen counter, I'd taken it as the invitation it was. She'd always been careless with the details. Details are what I live for. It took me less than a day to outfit the lake house with enough surveillance to rival a CIA safe house. High-grade thermal cameras hidden in the eaves, microphones in the air vents, motion sensors under the deck. I watched her arrival through the lens of a thermal feed, her body heat flaring orange against the blue of the empty house. She moved with a confidence that made my gut twist. She wasn't worried about being caught. She wasn't worried about me. That was her mistake. The first day, she wandered the house like a queen surveying her kingdom, humming that same damn tune under her breath. She opened her laptop and typed emails, none to me. She poured wine and read a book I'd never seen her pick up before. Normal. Boring. But it was the second day that everything changed. Silas Vane showed up like a phantom from the graveyard of my trust. He'd parked down the road, covered his plates, and entered through the back, like a man who'd done this before. Like a man who belonged. I watched him embrace her. Watched her lips part as she whispered his name. Watched the way her fingers curled into his jacket like she'd been waiting her whole life to hold him. I should have been angry. I should have been furious. But instead, I felt cold. Detached. Like I was watching the dissection of a corpse. Because that's what our marriage was now, a body with no soul. I'd been trained to watch without blinking. To gather evidence. To build the case. And that's exactly what I did. Their conversation started with laughter, wine glasses clinking, hands brushing too casually. But by the time the bottle was empty, the tone shifted. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. How do we do it? She asked him. He's too smart to just vanish. Silas smiled that easy smile of his, the one that had sold juries and judges alike. He's not the Julian he used to be, he said, swirling the wine in his glass. He's a CEO now. Comfortable. He thinks he's safe. I wanted to reach through the screen and show him just how wrong he was. But I stayed silent, recording every word, every gesture. Because this wasn't just an affair. This was strategy. This was war. Rowena's voice dropped, and for a moment, she looked small, like the woman I'd married. He's a good man, she said. He deserves better than this. But then her lips curved in a way that made my stomach turn. But we deserve better than this too. We can't live in his shadow forever. Silas took her hand, pressing it to his lips like a knight in a fairy tale. When he's gone, he said, we'll be free. The accounts will transfer to us, and the syndicate will take care of the rest. We'll be untouchable. The syndicate. That was the word that flipped the switch in my head. I'd heard it in Algiers, when 3 of my best men died in an ambush that shouldn't have happened. Varelli's syndicate. Smugglers. Assassins. Human traffickers. The kind of people Cerberus Operations was built to fight. And now they were in my home. In my marriage. In my wife's eyes. I called Kala from the dark corner of my study, my voice steady even as my hand shook. She was my most trusted field analyst, a woman whose loyalty was earned in blood and sweat, not a wedding ring. Silas Vane, I said. Run him through everything. Every contact, every account. I want to know if he's tied to Varelli. She didn't even hesitate. I'm on it, she said, her voice all business. If he's dirty, I'll find it. And she did. It didn't take her long. Silas Vane has ties to the Varelli syndicate, she told me 2 days later. Financial transfers through shell companies, offshore accounts. He's been meeting with their second-in-command, Nico Varelli. Julian, this isn't just an affair. It's an infiltration. I closed my eyes, the betrayal burning like acid. And Rowena? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Calla hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. She's either a puppet or a player, she said. But either way, she's part of this now. You can't trust her. I let the silence stretch between us. Calla knew me well enough not to fill it. When I finally spoke, my voice felt like steel. Then we treat her like an enemy asset, I said. No mercy. Calla's breath caught. Just once. Copy that, boss, she said. I ended the call and stared at the wall, my mind a whirlwind of plans and contingencies. Rowena thought I was away on business. She thought she had time. She thought she was safe. But I'd spent my entire career making sure the people I loved were safe, even if it meant becoming the monster in the dark. I'd spent my entire life knowing how to dismantle a network from the inside out. And now the network was inside my home, my marriage, my heart. But I wasn't the man she thought I was anymore. I wasn't the man Silas Vane played tennis with on Saturdays. I was the man who'd buried enemies in the desert and called it justice. I was the man who'd build Cerberus operations from the bones of dead men and the secrets they carried. Rowena had made her choice. Silas had made his. And now I was making mine. The game behind her eyes was over. Now it was time for mine. I came home that night as if nothing had changed. My key turned in the lock, the click echoing in the darkened hallway like a confession. The air smelled like home, cedar, and the faint trace of her perfume, and for a moment I wanted to believe it was still ours, that she was still mine. But the moment passed. I'd seen the way she smiled for him, that small tilt of her head that used to be mine alone. Now it was a weapon. I knew what she'd planned at the lake house. I'd heard every word. And yet, as I crossed the threshold into the living room, she greeted me like any other wife. Julian, she called, her voice sweet and soft, laced with the same lullaby she always used to soothe my demons. You're back early. Flight was ahead of schedule, I lied, slipping my jacket over the back of the chair. The sound of it felt final somehow, like dropping a stone into deep water. Thought I'd surprise you. She smiled, wide and bright, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Surprise. Fear. Calculation. She hadn't expected me home tonight. She'd expected the usual excuses, meetings in Prague, a quick drink with the ambassador, anything to keep me at arm's length while she and Silas finished their plans. But here I was, standing in the living room, watching her juggle the mask she'd worn for years. Let me get dinner started, she said, turning toward the kitchen. Her tone was too eager, too prepared. I watched her shoulders stiffen as she reached for the cutting board. My gut twisted, remembering the night she'd taught me to cook, the way she'd laughed when I nearly set the kitchen on fire. How long ago had that been? When had that laugh turned into something else? I followed her to the kitchen, every step a rehearsal in normalcy. Smells good, I said, my voice a low hum meant to calm the predator coiled in my chest. What's the occasion? She didn't look up. You, she said simply. You've been working so hard. You deserve a night off. She poured me a whiskey, my favorite, the one I'd introduced her to on our honeymoon in Scotland. She even used the crystal tumbler she'd bought me for our 5th anniversary. A perfect, thoughtful wife. I watched her pour, watched the way the amber liquid caught the light. She handed me the glass with a smile, her eyes locked on mine. To us, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. To all the years ahead. I raised the glass, but I didn't drink. Instead, I watched her. She waited, her smile faltering. Aren't you going to taste it? She asked, just a hint of nerves beneath the sweetness. I took a slow sip, letting the whiskey roll over my tongue, memorizing every note. It tasted wrong. A bitterness that didn't belong in that bottle. My stomach clenched. She drugged me. She'd really done it. The woman I loved for more than a decade was trying to erase me like a stain on her perfect new life. I felt the rage in my chest, hot and dangerous. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled, a lazy grin I'd used in 100 interrogations. Perfect, I lied. Just what I needed. She relaxed, the tension melting from her shoulders. She turned back to the stove, humming that lullaby under her breath. The same one I'd heard at the lake house. The same one she'd used to calm Silas when he'd asked if she could really do this. I let the poison work its way through my bloodstream, my head starting to spin just enough to make it believable. She watched me from the corner of her eye, her movements too smooth, too practiced. When she thought I couldn't see, she slipped her phone from her pocket and stepped into the bathroom. I waited. I let the seconds tick by, my pulse steady even as the room blurred around the edges. I could hear her voice, hushed and frantic. It's done, she whispered. He won't wake for 8 hours. We move everything tonight. 8 hours. That's how long she thought she had. That's how long they planned to steal everything from me. My accounts. My name. My life. I wanted to laugh. She'd forgotten who she was married to. I'd spent a lifetime making people believe what I wanted them to believe. I'd spent a lifetime faking weakness, faking defeat, so that when the time came, I could strike like a viper. She thought she'd won. That was her greatest mistake. She came out of the bathroom, all sweetness and worry. "Julian," she asked, "you look pale. Why don't you lie down for a bit? I'll handle everything tonight. Just rest." I let my eyes drift closed, my body heavy, my breathing slow. She watched me, waiting. I let the silence stretch, let her believe the lie. In the darkness behind my lids, I saw her at the lake house, the way she'd kissed Silas, the way she'd planned my downfall with that same lullaby on her lips. I let the rage simmer, cold and clean, sharpening my focus. When her footsteps faded down the hall, I opened my eyes and rolled out of bed. She didn't know I'd replaced the real safe, that the real data, our accounts, our black files, everything, was locked down behind biometric encryption she couldn't crack. She didn't know I'd activated protocol Mero the moment Kala confirmed Silas's ties to Varelli. She didn't know I'd set traps in every account, every safe house, every contact. She didn't know I'd turned every friend she thought she had into an informant. She didn't know me at all. I moved through the house like a ghost, checking the feeds from the cameras I'd hidden in every room. I watched her pack her bags, passport, cash, the burner phone. I watched her slip on the necklace Silas had given her. I watched her type a message, "We're clear. Move tonight." I smiled. Let her move. Let them think they'd won. Because when they came for the final prize, they'd find me waiting. I poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink, watching it swirl like a funeral shroud. The lullaby had ended. The real game had begun. And Rowena Creed had no idea who she was really playing. 3 days later, the plan unfolded exactly as I'd predicted. They came for me at dawn, boots and helmets and rifles at the ready. The SWAT team kicked in the front door, glass exploding like a promise of violence. My heart didn't even race. I'd been here before, 100 times in 100 countries. The smell of adrenaline mixed with sweat, the stomp of boots on hardwood, the bark of orders. Hands where I can see them. One of them shouted, his voice rough from too many late nights and bad coffee. I raised my hand slowly, careful to look dazed and confused. The cuffs bit into my wrists, cold steel against skin, and I let them lead me to the armored truck. Rowena watched from the sidewalk, wrapped in a blanket like some tragic heroine. Tears streaked her face, her hair artfully disheveled, her eyes wide and trembling. She looked exactly how they'd coached her to look. Her performance deserved an award. Behind her, Silas Vane stood like the perfect protector. His hand rested on her shoulder, the other tucked in his pocket with that lawyer's calm. He even managed to look a little sad for me, as though he regretted what he'd done, as though he wasn't the one who'd orchestrated every bit of this. I met his gaze and gave him the smallest nod. Let him think I was broken. Let him think he'd won. They dragged me into the station, fluorescent lights flickering overhead like a stutter in reality. Detective Harden, thick neck, thicker ego, met me in the hallway. He carried a folder like it was a loaded gun. "Your wife gave us everything," he sneered, voice slick with the satisfaction of a man who thought he'd caught the big fish. He slapped the folder on the table in front of me. "Fake bank transfers. Encrypted logs. We've got you, Creed." I leaned back in my chair, cuffs rattling, and studied him the way I used to study foreign agents on the other side of the glass. His shoes were polished but worn at the edges. His tie had a coffee stain near the knot. His eyes darted just a little too often to the camera in the corner. He was nervous. Good. Nervous men make mistakes. "Where's my lawyer?" I asked, my voice steady, calm. The voice of a man who'd done nothing wrong. The voice of a man who'd once dismantled networks with nothing but a phone call and a favor. Harden smirked. "Your wife's lawyer has recused himself." "Conflict of interest," he said. His grin widened. Yes, he didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. "My lawyer?" "Silas Vane." Of course. The circle completed itself with neat precision. I could almost admire it if it hadn't been so predictable. I let the silence stretch until it hurt, then let out a small, resigned sigh. "One call?" I said. "That's all I ask." Harden considered it, then shrugged. "One call," he agreed. He handed me the phone, the cord stretching like an umbilical. I dialed a number only a handful of people in the world knew. Vincent March. DOJ contact. Friend. The man who'd owed me since the night in Marawi when I'd saved his entire detail from a Varelli kill squad. He answered on the second ring. "Vincent," I said, my voice low and steady. "It's time." He didn't ask questions. He never did. "Give me 20 minutes, he replied, and the line went dead. I replaced the receiver and leaned back, letting Hardin think he'd won. He didn't know the game had ended the moment I made the call. 20 minutes later, the door slammed open. Agent Maura Linden swept in, her badge shining like a sword. "Uncuff him," she ordered, her voice a blade of authority. Hardin blinked, then stammered. "But..." "Now," she snapped. They fumbled with the keys, unlocking the cuffs with trembling hands. I rubbed my wrists, feeling the circulation return, and smiled at Hardin like a wolf might smile at a rabbit. "Nice work," I said, voice cold. "Really top-notch." He backed away like I'd slapped him. Maura gestured for me to follow. We walked past the desks and the gawking officers, down the hallway to Chief Ellison's office. The door swung open, and there they were, Silas and Rowena. She was wearing that same blanket, her face a study in contrition. Silas had his lawyer mask on, hands folded, eyes calm. He turned as I entered, and for a brief second, his confidence cracked. He hadn't expected this. That made it all the sweeter. I shut the door behind me, letting the click echo in the room. "Who did you think you were framing?" I asked, my voice soft, almost gentle. But they knew that tone. They'd heard it before, in different rooms, in different countries. They'd heard it right before everything fell apart. Rowena's eyes widened, her lips trembling. "Julian," she began, but I held up a hand. "Save it," I said, my voice flat. "You wanted me gone. You wanted my accounts, my business, my name. You thought you'd found the perfect mark. But you forgot who I am." Silas stepped forward, his lawyer's calm already cracking. "Julian, let's be reasonable." I turned on him like a snake, my eyes sharp and cold. "Reasonable? You framed me with fake bank records. You tried to bury me with the Varelli syndicate. You tried to kill me in my own home. And you thought a blanket apology would fix that." I laughed, the sound harsh and raw. "You never stood a chance." He faltered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You can't prove any of that." I reached into my pocket and placed a small black USB drive on the table. "Every conversation," I said. "Every transfer. Every plan. Recorded, documented, authenticated." I let the words sink in, let him see the future he'd earned. Rowena started to cry then. Real tears or perfect performance, I couldn't tell. She reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said, my voice a whisper. "Don't you dare." Maura crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Creed, do you want to press charges?" I looked at Rowena, then Silas. The man who'd stolen my wife, my trust, my home. The woman who'd once sung me to sleep and now tried to poison my future. I felt nothing. Just the cold certainty that they'd underestimated me, and now they'd pay. "Yes," I said finally, my voice like steel. "Press every charge you can. I want them to feel every minute of every year they tried to steal from me." Maura nodded. "It's done." She turned to Ellison. "Book them both." Rowena's sobs filled the room, a lullaby of regret. Silas cursed under his breath, the facade finally gone. And I stood there, silent and strong, the man they'd tried to bury. The man they'd underestimated. The man they just made unstoppable. Rowena disappeared after that. Left me a shaky letter, handwritten, tears smudging the ink. Taped to the mirror like some half-hearted apology. "I'm scared of who you've become," it said, the words jagged and small. Like she was the victim and I was the monster. Classic deflection. Like betrayal came with a get-out-of-jail-free card if you just played the part of the frightened wife. She'd spent 11 years learning my every tell, every soft spot, and she'd weaponized them all against me. But the thing about me is, I don't stay down for long. Days bled into nights as I put the pieces together. The house was empty but humming with the ghosts of every lie she'd told me. Every cabinet, every closet, every inch of our shared life had become a crime scene in my mind. I tore it apart, searching for answers. The safe house in the city was empty, too. She'd left a trail of breadcrumbs I was sure she thought I'd follow. But I wasn't that easy to bait. Not anymore. I needed proof. I needed something tangible, something I could burn down to the ground. Then Iris showed up. Rowena's younger sister. The one with the bright eyes and the nervous laugh, who used to call me Jules, like we were family. She arrived at my office, pale and trembling, a ball of nerves wrapped in a cheap coat. She looked like she'd aged a decade since I'd last seen her. Her hand shook as she reached for the chair opposite my desk, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Julian, she said, voice cracking. I didn't know who else to turn to. She's gone. She's really gone. I leaned back, steepling my fingers. Iris, why are you here? My tone was soft but cold, the way I'd learned to talk to assets who might be holding the key to a puzzle. I'm not the man she wanted me to be anymore. Tears welled up in her eyes. She asked me to get something for her, she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small, battered USB drive, the plastic casing chipped at the corner. She told me it was important, that it would keep her safe. But I looked. I had to. My stomach tightened. I reached for the drive slowly, like it was a live grenade. What's on it? Her lips trembled. I think she was deeper than I thought. Deeper than we all thought. She hesitated, then whispered. She was working with them long before Silas. Before you even suspected. I closed my eyes, rage and betrayal curling around my spine like a vice. Show me, I said. Iris nodded, her hands trembling as she connected the drive to the laptop on my desk. The screen flickered to life, folders opening like wounds. The first file was a video, grainy surveillance footage of Rowena in a dark alley, shaking hands with a man I recognized instantly. Nico Varelli, the second in command of the Varelli Syndicate. The man responsible for the Algiers massacre. The man who'd left my men bleeding in the dust. Rowena's face was clear as day, her smile practiced and precise as she handed him a small black bag. Money? Documents? I didn't need to guess. I'd seen that exchange too many times in too many countries. The timestamp on the footage made my stomach drop 2 years before Silas Fane ever showed up at that gala. 2 years before she ever started sleeping in the guest room with her excuses and her lullabies. I clicked through the files, each one a dagger. Money transfers from offshore accounts, some in my name, some in hers. Meetings at funerals of men who died under my command. Men I trusted. Men I'd buried. And she'd been there, standing next to Nico, her face a mask of grief for me, for the world, but never for them. She was part of the plan from the beginning. The perfect plan. The perfect lie. Iris sobbed beside me, covering her mouth with her hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. I didn't know she was capable of. But I wasn't listening anymore. The rage was too loud. My heart was a drumbeat of betrayal, my mind a hurricane of every moment she'd spent pretending to love me. Every laugh, every touch, every whispered promise. It had all been a performance. She'd built me up just to tear me down. And I'd let her. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the floor. Iris, I said, my voice calm but lethal. You did the right thing bringing this to me. But you need to go. Now. Forget you ever saw this. Forget you ever knew. She looked up at me, eyes wide with fear. Julian, what are you going to do? I met her gaze, and for a moment I saw the reflection of the man I'd become. Hard, cold, ruthless. The man Rowena had created with every lie. I'm going to finish it, I said. She flinched, but she didn't argue. She grabbed her purse and fled the office like the place was on fire. Maybe it was. Maybe I was. I stood there alone, staring at the flickering screen. Rowena Creed had never been my wife. She'd been my assassin, my betrayer, my ghost. I copied the files to my encrypted server, locking them behind enough firewalls to keep even the Varelli Syndicate guessing. Then I smashed the USB under my boot heel, the plastic shards scattering like ashes. No loose ends. No mercy. I thought of the men who died in Algiers, their bodies broken and lifeless because someone had fed the Varelli Syndicate their positions. Because someone had given them the coordinates. Because someone had smiled at me across the dinner table and asked how my day had been. I thought of Silas Fane, sitting in a cell somewhere, thinking he'd played the game so perfectly. He was just a pawn. The real player had always been Rowena. And now I knew. I picked up my phone and dialed Kala. I need you, I said, my voice flat. We're not just taking them down. We're burning the whole house to the ground. She hesitated only a moment. Copy that, she replied. I ended the call and looked out the window at the city below. The skyline was a jagged promise, a battlefield waiting to be claimed. Rowena had tried to bury me. She tried to erase me. But she'd forgotten one thing. I don't die easy. I rise. I rise from every betrayal stronger, sharper, deadlier. And this time, there'd be no lullaby. No forgiveness. No mercy. Only the cold, hard truth and the vengeance it demanded. I told Vincent March, my DOJ contact, I'm done playing defense. I want full operational control. The words felt like a bullet leaving the chamber, clean, precise, unstoppable. I'd spent months letting Rowena and Silas think they were winning, spent nights letting the poison of betrayal eat away at the man I thought I was. But that man was gone now. What remained was the man I had to become to survive. Vincent hesitated on the other end of the line. "Julian, you know what that means," he said quietly. "If you go off the books, there's no going back. No support. No extraction." His voice cracked like old wood. "You're on your own." "Then take me off the books," I replied, a calm finality in my voice that left no room for argument. I wasn't the man who needed approval anymore. I was the man who made his own war. I hung up and stood in the silence of my office. The city spread out below me like a map of every sin I'd ever committed. My reflection in the window stared back, hard eyes, lines of exhaustion, a face that had aged 10 years in as many weeks. But there was a purpose in those lines, a focus that no one could take from me. The next day, I disappeared. Liquidated investments, sold off properties, emptied accounts, all except the ones they'd been watching. I wanted Rowena and Silas to think they'd won, that I was broken and running. Let them relax. Let them laugh over wine and candlelight. Let them think their game had ended. Meanwhile, I was setting my own board. Calla moved with me, silent as a shadow. She'd been with me since the desert days, blood and dust and bone-deep trust. She didn't ask questions. She didn't flinch when the fake news reports started rolling in. Julian Creed wanted for financial crimes, Cerberus Operations CEO implicated in arms dealing. She just nodded and asked what I needed. Everything, I told her. I want every screen, every account, every email. I want to know when Rowena's dog needs a walk and when Silas Vane takes his afternoon espresso. I want to own their lives before I destroy them. She smiled, a small, sharp thing that reminded me why I'd trusted her all these years. Consider it done. While Rowena and Silas sipped cocktails in Vancouver, holed up in their condo with its view of the harbor, I built the trap. I created false accounts loaded with digital gold, accounts that looked so tempting they'd salivate at the chance. Offshore transfers. Shell corporations. I made it look like every dirty dollar they dreamed of was at their fingertips. And while they reached for it, I was watching every keystroke, every password, every transaction. I was the ghost in their machine, the virus in their blood. Meanwhile, the Varelli syndicate wasn't sitting still. Word had gotten out that Julian Creed was a loose end, a man who knew too much. They tried to buy me off first, a message from one of their street-level hitters, an envelope of cash, and a promise of safe passage. I burned it. Then came the threats, emails with photos of my men in Algiers, bodies twisted, eyes open. A reminder of what they'd done, what Rowena had started. But I'd seen worse. I'd done worse. I wasn't afraid of shadows. I was the man who hunted them. Then came the bomb. I'd parked my car in the alley behind the old Cerberus field office, the one I hadn't used in years. The blast rocked me like a hammer, shrapnel biting into my shoulder. For a split second, I thought I was gone. I thought I'd joined the ghosts of Algiers. But the training kicked in. I rolled with the blast, teeth gritted, eyes scanning for threats. Blood soaked my sleeve, but I was still breathing, still alive. When the dust settled, I climbed out of the wreckage and called Calla. They tried to make it look like an accident, I said, my voice raw. It didn't work. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew better. "It's time, boss," she said. "We end this." I spent the night in a safe house 2 cities over, the old safe house I'd built with fallback plans in every corner. I watched the footage again and again. Rowena's smile, Silas's smirk, Nico Varelli's cold eyes. Every time I saw them, the rage sharpened into something precise and surgical. I wasn't going to let them run. I wasn't going to let them hide. This wasn't about justice anymore. Justice had left the room the moment Rowena sang that lullaby, and Silas Vane shook my hand at the gala. This was retribution. I called Vincent at dawn. "I need DOJ clearance to move on Varelli," I said. He was silent for a long time. "You know what that means, Julian?" he said finally. "It means we can't protect you if this goes sideways." "It means your name is already in the dirt," I cut in. "I'm not asking for a lifeline. I'm asking for permission." He exhaled, defeated. "Consider yourself unsanctioned. You're off the books." I ended the call and stared at the horizon. The sun was rising, gold and fierce. Like me. Like the man I'd become. I gathered my gear: Kevlar, sidearm, the files Calla had compiled on every player in the game. Rowena, Silas, Nico Varelli, the bishop, even Vincent's half-worried face. I wasn't going to let them decide how this ended. I'd spent my whole life fighting other people's wars. This time, it was mine. Rowena and Silas were still in Vancouver, sipping champagne and laughing over their victory. They'd be planning their exit strategy, new identities, new lives, money they thought they'd stolen from me. But I was already there. Already in the shadows of that condo. Already in the server room. Already in their dreams. I let the hate go cold, the way I'd been taught. Cold hate is patient. Cold hate doesn't make mistakes. I set the last trap, the one they'd never see coming. And then I waited. Because they thought they were safe. They thought I was dead. They thought they'd won. But they'd forgotten who taught them the game. They'd forgotten who wrote the rules. Julian Creed wasn't just coming for them. I was the storm. And no one saw it coming. I leaked the intel with the same care I'd used defusing a bomb, methodical, deliberate, patient. I let whispers trickle into the right ears. The DOJ was pulling back, case falling apart, Julian Creed out of reach. It was a lie so easy to believe it felt like honey on a razor. Rowena panicked first. Calla picked it up in her voice when she called Silas from the safe line. What if it's not enough? She'd whispered. What if he's still out there? Her fear was an open wound, and Silas, ever the puppet master, was ready with his soothing balm. Trust me, he'd said, his tone dripping false calm. We'll finish this, love. We'll get out. He thought he was a master strategist. I let him believe it. I let him believe that DOJ was the only threat that mattered. Let him believe that if the case against him crumbled, he could walk away with clean hands. But I was the man they'd tried to erase, and I'd learned how to become invisible long before they even thought to try. Silas reached out to Nico Varelli like a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. I caught the transmission, encrypted, but not enough to stop me. Calla ran decryption overnight, and by morning I had the whole conversation. We need out, Silas had told Nico, desperation heavy in his voice. New identities, new lives. Nico, cold and calm, had agreed, but at a price. $5 million. A private meeting at the waterfront warehouse. Bring Rowena, Nico had said. I want to see the pretty little bird who sang your tune. It was perfect. Too perfect. They were running into the net I'd cast for them without even realizing it. I could almost taste their fear. The warehouse loomed on the edge of the industrial district, abandoned to the eye but humming with secrets. I'd turned it into a command post, cameras, hidden mics, sensors in the rafters. Calla and Vincent worked the perimeter with a small team, silent operators, eyes like razors, loyalty earned in blood. We owned every angle. We'd see every move. The night air was thick with salt and oil, the hum of the harbor cranes groaning like old bones. I slipped through the shadows, my breath measured, my body a weapon forged in betrayal. I could feel the adrenaline hum beneath my skin, a reminder of every mission, every kill order, every whispered promise in a dark alley. But this was personal. The kind of personal that put a bullet between your eyes and called it mercy. Inside the warehouse, the setup was meticulous. Plastic sheeting to muffle sound, folding tables stacked with burner phones and laptops, men with AR-15s at every corner. Silas was already there, pacing like a caged animal. His suit was crisp, but his tie was loose, sweat beading at his hairline. Rowena stood near him, arms crossed, eyes scanning the shadows like she could sense me there. She wore that necklace I'd given her on our 5th anniversary, a silver locket with her initials engraved inside. She didn't deserve it anymore. Silas carried a black duffel bag, heavy with cash. $5 million. Blood money. He handed it to Nico Varelli with a forced smile. Everything you asked for, he said, his voice a trembling knife. Nico, tall, lean, dead eyes, unzipped the bag, rifled through the stacks. You think money buys you out, Silas? He asked, his tone almost bored. You think the Varelli syndicate is a bank? Silas stiffened. We had a deal, he snapped. New names. New passports. You promised. Nico laughed, a low, cruel sound. I promised nothing, he said. You're lucky I didn't have you shot the moment you called me. You and your pretty songbird. He flicked his gaze to Rowena, his smile like a knife blade. But maybe we can work something out. Rowena flinched, her eyes darting to the exits. She'd realized too late what she'd stepped into. I felt a moment of savage satisfaction. She'd thought she was the queen on this board, moving pieces with a flick of her wrist. But she was just a pawn. Always had been. I let the silence stretch until even the guards started to shift uneasily. And then he walked in. The bishop, real name, Lawrence Hale, ex-CIA deputy director, ghost in the machine. The man who'd taught me half the tradecraft I'd later use to dismantle his empire. He wore a tailored suit that cost more than most people's cars, and his smile was colder than the night air. "Mr. Vane," he drawled, eyes glinting. "Miss Crete. What a surprise to find you here." Silas paled. "Bishop," he stammered. "I didn't know you'd." Hale raised a hand, silencing him. "You think you can walk away from this?" he asked. His tone was mild, almost amused. "You think you can buy your way out of the syndicate? Out of me?" He clicked his tongue, disappointment in every syllable. "You were always so eager, Silas. So desperate to prove yourself. And you, Rowena," his gaze slid to her, lingering like a spider. "Such a lovely distraction." Rowena shrank back, her mask cracking. I did what I was told," she said, her voice thin. "I did everything, eh?" Hale's eyes flicked to the duffel bag. "Then hand it over," he said, voice like velvet-wrapped steel. "And maybe, just maybe, I'll let you disappear." Silas hesitated, his hands trembling. I watched him from the shadows, the urge to step out and end it right there nearly overwhelming. But I waited. Timing was everything. Hale took the bag, unzipped it, counted the stacks like a man counting sins. Then he looked up, his smile razor-sharp. "And now," he said softly, "we begin the real negotiation." That was my cue. I pressed the comms button at my wrist, a single click. Callah's voice crackled in my ear. "Team in position." My pulse was steady, my breath measured. I stepped out from behind the crates, every movement rehearsed. The overhead lights flickered as I killed the mains, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Red emergency backups flared, casting everything in blood. Silas's eyes went wide. Rowena's breath caught. Hale's smile never wavered. "Evening, Lawrence," I said, my voice low and lethal. Or should I say, Bishop? Hale turned slowly, his expression cool. "Julian," he drawled. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Rowena's mouth fell open. "Julian," she whispered, but I didn't look at her. She'd already sung her last song. This was for me. Silas fumbled for his sidearm, but I already had my gun drawn, steady as a promise. "Don't," I warned him. "You never were fast enough." Rowena's hand twitched toward her purse. I saw the glint of metal. "You're too late," she hissed. "We already won." I smiled coldly. "Funny thing about winning," I said. "It's all in the details." I turned my gaze to the duffel bag. "You think 5 million buys you freedom, Silas? You think it buys you protection, Rowena?" I leaned in just enough for them to see the fury in my eyes. "I own every account you think you own. I own every name you think you've changed. I own every second of the rest of your lives." Rowena reached for her gun, desperation painting her features. I almost pitied her. Almost. "I removed the firing pin at the Fairmont Hotel," I said. "You really thought you were still playing chess?" And then the real endgame began. Lights off. Red emergency backups flickered to life, painting the warehouse in a blood-hued glow that made every face look monstrous. The guards, trained to respond to threats like attack dogs, lunged toward the sound of my voice, their weapons raised, eyes wide with adrenaline. But knockout gas hissed through the vents before they could fire a single shot. One by one, they dropped, limbs going slack as the sedative coursed through their bloodstreams. Bodies hit the concrete floor like rag dolls, the sound echoing like an accusation. Silas's eyes darted around the room, panic blooming in his expression. His hand trembled on his sidearm, his finger white against the trigger. "Julian," he spat, voice trembling. "Don't do this. We can work something out, Al." I stepped forward, my silhouette solid against the red haze. My voice was cold as steel, honed by every betrayal, every lie. "Work something out?" I echoed, my tone dripping with contempt. "Like you worked out my accounts, my home, my life? Like you worked out my wife's lullabies." Rowena's breath came in quick, shallow gasps, her eyes darting between me and the gas-hazed shadows. "Julian, please," she started, her voice pitched high, the practiced panic of a woman who'd used fear as a weapon for too long. "You don't understand it." I cut her off with a raised hand, my fingers steady despite the rage boiling in my gut. "No more lies," I said, the words final, a blade severing the last thread between us. "I've heard your lullabies. I've seen the plans. I know about the syndicate. I know about Nico Varelli, the money, the meetings before Silas even showed up. I know you chose this, Rowena. Don't pretend it was forced. You played the game, and you lost." Her mouth fell open, the tears gathering in her eyes more reflex than remorse. "Julian." Hale Bishop stepped forward, his expression carved from ice. Even in this chaos, his composure didn't crack. That's what made him so dangerous. Julian, he said, voice low and calm, as though he were addressing a fellow predator. You can walk away from this. Let the girl go. Let Silas go. We'll give you back your accounts. We'll clean the slate. His lips curved in a cold smile. We'll even throw in a bonus for your trouble. I stared at him, the memories of every whispered betrayal flooding my mind. The men in Algiers who'd trusted me with their lives, the colleagues who'd bled for me, the life I'd built from scratch while this man had pulled strings behind the scenes, orchestrating my ruin. You think I care about money? I asked, my voice flat. You think this was about the accounts? About the safe house? About the cars or the title? I took another step forward, feeling every eye in the room on me, even the unconscious ones. You forgot one thing, Bishop, I said, my voice a quiet snarl. I built Cerberus operations from the bones of every man who thought he could break me. I buried the best of them, and I walked out alive. You think you can buy me? You think you can own me? I own you. Bishop's eyes narrowed, the smile fading from his face. You're making a mistake, he said softly. There's no coming back from this. I gave a small, cold laugh, a sound that felt like a final verdict. I'm not coming back, I replied. That's the point. Rowena lunged then, her hand darting to her side, fingers curling around the grip of the small pistol she'd hidden in her waistband. But I'd seen her move 1,000 times before. I'd taught her that move on the shooting range back when I thought we were a team. I'd taught her how to aim, how to breathe, how to shoot. But I'd also taught her to check her weapon. She'd forgotten that last part. She pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. Her eyes went wide, betrayal and fear mingling in the red light. She choked, the word dying in her throat. I tilted my head, the smallest of smiles playing at the corners of my mouth. I removed the firing pin at the Fairmont Hotel, I said, my voice almost gentle. You really thought you were still playing chess? She stumbled back, the weight of her choices pressing her down. Silas cursed, his gun shaking. Julian, he barked, desperation bleeding through his voice, we can. I didn't give him the chance to finish. A single shot cracked through the warehouse, the sound of punctuation mark at the end of every betrayal. Silas's gun flew from his hand as he crumpled to the floor, clutching his arm. I'd aimed for his bicep, enough to hurt, enough to remind him who he was dealing with, but not enough to kill. Not yet. Bishop didn't flinch. He just watched me, his eyes cold and knowing. What now, Julian? He asked, his tone amused. You think you can take us all down yourself? Even you can't fight the entire syndicate. I stepped forward, my boots echoing on the concrete like a war drum. I don't need to, I said, my voice a quiet promise. I reached for the duffel bag Silas had handed over, flipped it open. Inside, among the stacks of cash, was a second compartment, small, hidden, but not hidden enough. I opened it, revealing hard drives, evidence. Blackmail. Every secret the syndicate had hoarded over the years. Documents. Videos. Names. Dates. The power source of their entire empire. Bishop's eyes flickered for the first time, a crack in the mask. You son of a... I held up a small device, the transmitter blinking green. Every agent, every account, every transaction, backed up and ready to upload the moment my heart stops, I said. You think I came here without a failsafe? You trained me better than that. He lunged, but Kala's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade. Drop it, Hale, she said, stepping from the shadows with a squad of silent operators at her back, weapons leveled. It's over. Bishop's hands rose, slow and deliberate, his face hard. You think this ends tonight? He asked, voice low. The syndicate has reach. You can't kill it. You can't even scratch it. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on his. You're right, I said, my voice a whisper meant only for him. But I can gut it. I can tear out its heart and leave it bleeding. I leaned in until I could smell the fear on his breath. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Rowena sobbed, her hands trembling. Julian, please, she whispered, her voice a shadow of the lullaby she'd sung all those nights. It was never supposed to be like this. I looked at her, my heart stone. But it is, I said. And now you get to live with the consequences. With a nod to Kala, I stepped back. Take them, I ordered. All of them. Kala's team moved in, swift and silent, binding wrists, securing evidence, clearing weapons. The warehouse buzzed with controlled chaos as agents led Rowena, Silas, Bishop, and Nico to waiting black vans outside. I watched them go, each step a victory, each tear a confession. As the last of them disappeared into the night, Kala turned to me. What now, boss? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I stared at the empty warehouse, the red light flickering, the smell of betrayal heavy in the air. Now, I said, my voice quiet. Now we finish what they started. We bring every last piece of their empire down. And when we're done, I paused, the weight of it all settling into my bones. We make sure they never hurt anyone again. Kala nodded, her face a mask of resolve. Then let's get to work, she said. I took a deep breath, the night air filling my lungs with the cold promise of justice. And for the first time in months, I felt alive. Because the game was no longer theirs to play. It was mine, and I was going to end it on my terms. Federal agents swarmed the warehouse like locusts, the heavy boots and shouts a harsh counterpoint to the hush that had settled after the gas. Hale Bishop was already in cuffs, head held high, lips pressed in a thin, defiant line. Silas Vane stumbled as they dragged him out, his expensive suit stained with sweat and fear. Nico Varelli went down screaming, a bullet wound in his leg from when he tried to run. And Rowena? She sat on the cold concrete floor, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she looked small, real, like the person I'd once thought I knew. But that woman had died the moment she'd chosen them over me. I stood back, arms folded, letting the scene play out like a final act in a tragedy I'd written long before tonight. Kala moved among the agents, her voice crisp, directing the arrests, collecting evidence. She met my eyes briefly, a silent nod of respect passing between us. She'd stuck by me when everything else had fallen apart. I'd owe her that loyalty forever. Rowena lifted her head as the agent snapped cuffs around her wrists, her eyes searching for something in me. Mercy, maybe. Understanding. I offered her neither. She'd spent too long perfecting her lies. Now she could sit with them in the dark. She opened her mouth, lips trembling as if to beg, but I turned away before the words could cut me. She'd made her choices. Now she'd face them. Vincent March, battered and bruised from weeks of sleepless nights, approached me as the last of them were loaded into black SUVs. Why didn't you kill them? He asked, his voice low. He'd seen the rage in me, felt the cold edge of it. He knew I could have ended them all in that warehouse and never lost a wink of sleep. I looked at the horizon, the early morning light just starting to break. Because death is peace, I said, my voice a steady hum. And they don't deserve peace. They deserve time. I let the words hang in the air, the weight of them pressing down like a verdict. Time to think. Time to remember. Time to feel every single betrayal they dealt out return to them in spades. Vincent studied me, his eyes wary but respectful. You're not the same man who started this, he said quietly. No, I replied, a small, hard smile on my lips. I'm not. And that was the truth. Julian Creed, the man who'd once believed in loyalty and love, was gone. What remained was a man who'd learned that trust is a weapon, and betrayal its sharpest blade. I turned and walked away from the warehouse, the dawn breaking behind me. My steps were steady, my heart calm. I didn't need vengeance anymore. I didn't need forgiveness. I just needed the truth, and the truth was mine now. A month later, I stood on the cliffs of Oregon, the wind biting cold against my face. The ocean below churned, restless and gray, a perfect mirror for the storm inside me. My new home sat just beyond the trees, a modest cabin, stripped of luxuries but stocked with every security measure I could fit inside four walls. It wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about control. About building a place no one could infiltrate. No one could betray. A place where the echoes of the past couldn't reach me unless I let them. Kala stood beside me, her hair whipped by the wind, eyes scanning the horizon. She'd stayed with me through the worst, proving again and again that loyalty still existed in this world, even if love had abandoned it. Rowena took a deal, she said finally, her voice low. 25 years. Silas too. Hale won't see sunlight again. I let the words sink in. 25 years behind bars. An eternity to think about every choice, every lie, every moment they'd smiled at me with knives hidden behind their teeth. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. It was a sentence that said, you don't get to walk away from what you've done. Vincent arrived a moment later, raising a small flask and a silent toast. To justice, he said, his voice ragged. The lines on his face looked deeper, older, carved by the weight of the months we'd all just survived. I raised mine, the whiskey burning down my throat like truth. To the dead who never got theirs, I replied. Faces flashed in my mind, my men in Algiers, the ones who'd trusted me, who'd died because Rowena had sold them out. I saw their smiles, their eyes, the way they'd fought even when the odds were impossible. They deserved more than an apology in a dark room. They deserved more than me, too. The silence that followed was heavy, but it felt honest. Nothing left to hide. Nothing left to lose. Kala touched my arm. "Will you ever forgive her?" she asked. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, almost tender. I shook my head, the wind stealing the word from my lips before I could speak it. "Not in this lifetime," I said finally. "Some betrayals demand more than vengeance. They demand memory." I met her eyes, and she nodded, understanding. She always did. I turned back to the ocean, the waves pounding against the rocks like a war drum. The sky stretched endless and gray, a canvas waiting for whatever came next. Maybe tomorrow I'd start over. Maybe tomorrow I'd build something new, something real. But not today. Today, I let the wind carry away the last echoes of the man I'd been. The man who'd trusted. The man who'd loved. The man who'd believed lullabies were truth. Because that man was dead, and the one who remained would never forget. Not her face. Not his lies. Not the day they tried to bury me and forgot I was the storm.